Hello all. In this video we are going to discuss about object oriented programming concepts. Python is a pure object oriented programming. We have been discussing about various objects in Python right from day one. We understand that everything is object, and for everything we referred, those are the objects we discussed about, right? Let's understand a little bit about some basics and what exactly the object oriented programming concepts and how and why that is useful in Python programming. Okay, first of all, let's discuss about there is something called class and there is something called object. Okay, so these are two important terms in object oriented programming concepts. So you might have heard about these terms earlier, maybe the C or C++ or .NET. So Java, these are some of the object oriented programming languages. C was not initially object oriented programming, but yes, C++ has the programming concepts, object oriented programming concepts, and let's try to understand why this came in, right? So many times, generally the software in the industry, in software, if I want to bring anything into a software, so we wanted to refer the real world objects and the categories or the prototype in the real world, so into a programming. So we need to map it to the objects what we refer in day-to-day life, right? For example, if I tell you, suppose car is a category, car is a class, right? So class means it is a prototype, it is defined, it has some characteristics, it has some features, it has some functionality, it moves, somebody drives, somebody ride into the car, and the car has some features, car needs to be serviced. So these are some of the basic characteristics of a car. But as a car, the whole, it is not exactly making you understand how it looks and how to touch to that, right? So the real object is the moment you create actual car, right? For example, you see Audi A6 white color, so that car where you can go and touch, so that is the actual object. Okay, so class is just a prototype. Okay, it is a logical entity, I would say, a logical entity which has some specifications. Okay, I'll take another example. Suppose the architect brings a plan for your construction, building construction. We call it the best architect who has given us the blueprint. Okay, so even if you have a very good blueprint, unless you create a building out of it, that blueprint is of no use, right? Even if the world's top architect is creating that blueprint, so it is not of any use unless you create a building out of it, right? And suppose you have a lot of land, and you start creating objects, you start creating buildings. If you have 10 buildings, there are 10 exactly same buildings you create out of the specifications, that is the blueprint given by the architect. Okay, so the 10 buildings are nothing but 10 objects, and the way this R needs to be constructed, so those things are part of your prototype. Okay, and as long as you have land, so those many objects you can create, right? Similarly, in Python programming, as long as you have RAM, so those many such various types of objects you can keep on creating. Okay, you may follow one particular architecture, the architect's blueprint, or you may have 3, 4 or different types of constructions you want to build, so that the entire thing can be implemented. Okay, so this is the basics about what is class and what is object. Okay, let's understand what is the need, right? For example, I will help you understand one important thing. Let's say I have a circle and I want to create a circle. Okay, then circle color. Okay, we can have a color, let's say color, then circle radius. Okay, suppose these are some of the parameters, some of the features of a circle. Okay, so this is how we represent a circle, right? The moment I say that, okay, radius needs to be increased, so I can simply say that, okay, circle radius equal to 4.8. okay, and now you can calculate the area of a circle. Okay, how to calculate? We can use import math and then area equal to pi r square, right? Math dot pi into radius radius, let me copy this into radius, correct, r square. So that's how one can calculate the area of a circle. So I hope my formula is correct. The area of a circle is pi r square. Okay, or you can yeah. So this is something we can calculate, correct. So this is good, no problem. Now let's imagine you have 200 such circles. Okay, let's say circle 1, circle 2, circle 3, and again you have, let's say you have circle sorry, this is all about circle 1 and this is all about circle 2. Sorry, 2. Okay, and let's say this is A2 and still it is red and here is 4.7. So you can have this. So you may want to have this 200, so you have to write 600 such lines. So definitely this is not a good way, right? So you can probably think about creating a for loop and adding every circle into a list of circles, maybe list of tuples or list of the list of list. So that is one option, right? You can have it, but still it is like more of managing your entire list with the number of circles, and nobody can really understand what data is this about. Okay, so there is a provision, right, with the help of classes and object. How about having something called of circle type itself? Okay, meaning suppose I say, okay, radius, and if I create C1 equal to circle, if I create C2 equal to circle, okay, you may not see much difference, but one important point I can observe here is, the best part is, now C1 is an object of type circle. Okay, so because that's what we are creating, so it is more meaningful now that we can have a circle object, okay, which we can use to refer to a circle object. So now C1 is, let us try to understand what is C1, right? C1 is a type of a circle. It is not an integer, not a float, not a list, but it is of type circle. So that means we have now created a user defined object. Okay, today now we have user defined object, that means our own object. Okay, unlike primitive data types like integer, float, string, right? So there are some user defined objects which we can create. Okay, so this has all the possible operations we can perform. There is a lot we can explore. Definitely we are not achieving what we are actually looking for, this number of circles, managing, maintaining, and having their own attributes. So every circle has its own area, its own different name, and its own different color maybe, right? So this is not something we achieved in this 1 or 2 lines, but yes, we can do that, and that makes more sense, and that becomes better way of reading this particular data and managing that data, right? So I can have number of circles. Now I can have hundreds of 200s of such circles with you, and now you can easily manage them. Okay, that's a simple one. I have now C1 and C2. So this is the syntax. Class is a keyword. Name you can give anything. Just remember that I have used capital C here for the circle. Okay, so name of the classes starts with the capital letter. That is not the restriction as such, but a standard practice. Okay, syntactically, even if you go for a small c, it will work. Okay, there is no problem. Okay, but as a standard practice, we should start the name of a class with the capital letter. Okay, now let's try and understand what is the value. Okay, C1 dot radius, we get it. C2 dot radius, we get the 4.2, right? So this is a little problem now, right? So I don't want every radius to have the same every circle has the same radius. So we have an option. We will try to solve that, but let me first explain you how it looks like and how to work with a little more hands-on, and try to establish some more comfort level in the some of the terms like object related and the class related terms. I will take another example. Let's say I use a car, okay, and I suppose want to have number of tires equal to 4. Okay, now I can also have a function, okay, which we can say that, okay, car is moving. Okay, and look at this, we have just created, okay, the moment we create the specifications, nothing happens. Unless you create an object, you can't see something, right? Unless you create a building, you know, you can't see the exact object, right? So that's how it is. So Audi, now I will use car, and I see that, okay, Audi dot number of tires, I see 4, right? So now let's understand, important thing here is this number of tires is the attribute of a class. Okay, so any number of car objects you create, you will get those many so same value for every object. Now I can also create a Merc class, okay, for Mercedes. Okay, Merc dot number of tires, yeah, here also 4, right? So this is how we can have a simple basic understanding about how to create an object and how to create use the class attributes, that is number of tires and move is another attribute. Let's try and understand how to use Merc dot move. Okay, so I want to call this, okay, but this won't work directly. Now there is a problem, why it is not working? So it says that move takes 0 positional argument, but 1 was given. So we haven't given anything here, right? We haven't provided any argument, but it is saying we have given 1. So I'll come to this point in a while. Okay, we will understand what we are actually doing. So just understand, I said these are class attributes. So ideally we should call them like this, and this time it worked. So line number 21 didn't work, but line number 22 has worked. Okay, is working for us. Okay, so let's try and understand car number of tires. Yeah, this also works, right? So that means attributes we can easily use, and every object has those attributes. Then the moment we come to a function, the function is now behaving or working little differently, and let's try to understand how it is behaving. Okay, so basically what happens is implicitly it passes which object you are actually using to call this function, and that is implicitly considered as a first argument here, and the name of the argument I can use anything here, and let's try to understand. Okay, and now this time just a moment, what happened here? Obj car dot move. Yeah, this time we can't call using a object using the car class itself, because that doesn't make sense, because car is just a prototype unless you have an object. So the actual car, that is Audi or Merc, is going to move, right? Car is just a prototype, right? So this time I say Merc dot move, and this time Merc dot move is now working and it says car is moving. So that means this first object is implicitly getting passed. Okay, so the name of this popular name of this this first argument is always used as a self, but there is no mandate, right? You can use whatever name you like, but self is more relevant, more meaningful, more appropriate name of the first argument of any function of a class, right? So it is going to be going to be the first argument, and that argument is the argument who is calling this particular function. Now let's try and understand. Okay, Merc dot name equal to Merc. Okay, then Audi dot name equal to Audi. Okay, let's try and understand what is happening now. Okay, now suppose I want to change a little bit definition, and in this particular function I am making one more little change here. Car name is moving, dot format self dot name, and let's try and understand what is happening. Okay, so Merc dot move, car object has no attribute name. Oh sorry, I should have called this later on. Okay, I should not call here, but yes, here I have created, and now you see Merc is now moving, and if you call this with Audi, you will see Audi is moving. That means the move function is implicitly passing the object which is used to call this function, and that is the object which is the nothing but a self. And now self dot name, it has something, and that's why it prints whatever is the value. Okay, so I repeat, I will take one more example using the same class. Okay, so just to make you comfortable here, so suppose number of tires equal to 4, and now I don't do anything here. Okay, so here I will use, let's say, C1 equal to car and C2 equal to another car, and obviously C1 dot number of tires is 4 and C2 dot number of tires is as well 4. That's pretty straightforward, right? Now C1 equal to, let's say, C1, I want to create one name, right, which should be part of C1. Okay, and let's say Audi, and I want to create C2 as well. Okay, now I want to create C1 dot color red, and I don't want to create C2 dot color, but I want to create C2 dot make year. Okay, so let's say 2019. Okay, so suppose these are some of the attributes you have, and now suppose you want to call C2 dot color. Obviously it won't work because C2 does not have this attribute. Means on the fly we are now giving some attributes to the objects. Whatever object you are looking for, you can customize that, you can make whatever you are looking for. Okay, so this is what is called as the object attributes. The number of tires is a class attribute. Okay, so the class attribute which is common, you call whatever objects you are going to create, you will be having that class attribute, but whatever is given or assigned to the object, those are the only attributes available with the class, with the object. Okay, now let's add one more function. The same thing here. Let's say def move, and first is of course self, whoever is calling this function. That particular object is used here, is moving. Okay, so I don't do anything now, but what I will do is C1 dot move. I call something went wrong here. I did not use format function. Format self dot name. Yeah, so Audi is moving down now. C2 equal to C2 dot move, and it says Merc is moving. Now let me do one more thing here. Okay, I can write another function. Okay, and let's say details, and here also there is a self, because every function is now going to use a self attribute. Every function has a self attribute. Okay, so inside this function we can access the object who is calling this particular function. So self dot name comma self dot color comma self dot make. Let's try it, and let's try to see what happens. Okay, so here suppose C1 dot details, there is a problem, right? The problem is the C1 does not have make, but we are trying to refer make of a C1. Remember, C1 does not have make. Look at this, C1 does not have. C2 has make. Okay, let me try and use C2 then. Okay, C2 also give me error, but C2 does not have color. Unfortunately, C2 does not have color. Okay, better I don't use color and name. Okay, now let's try. Yeah, now you see that C2 dot move and C2 dot details. Okay, here it prints Merc, and let's say C1 dot details, it prints Audi. Okay, that's a simple example, simple exercise which helps you to understand how you are using the class attributes and the object attributes. So the object attributes on the fly you can assign whatever you want, and only those are accessible wherever you go. Okay, now let me make a little modification. This car is moving in another direction, some direction, right? So here I will write direction, okay, and I will pass the direction and collect here, okay. So let's here use one argument that is left, okay, and here I will use some other direction that is right, okay. So now the second argument, that means the first argument we pass, the second argument, that is how we pass the second argument, but the first argument is implicitly the C1, whoever is calling this move function, C2 in this case, right? So left and right, so Audi is moving in left direction because we are passing the direction attribute, that is the second argument, as a left or right direction, right? And the first argument is self automatically. So that's how we can use add the second argument and we access this, okay. So that's a pretty simple example. Now I want to use, and I want to make sure that we achieve what we are actually looking for. So I want to have every object with some unique or its own characteristics. I can't have the same characteristics for every object I am going to create. We can definitely customize, but let me also try and help you how the objects are getting created, okay. Let's use one class, let's say employee, okay. We can create any classes, any names. Let's say in employee, I will say employee ID start number, okay. I'll just use some start number and define a function, and here there is one special function, okay. So the double underscore things, okay, forget about this. First of all, let me just help you understand. Inside underscore init underscore function, and let's try and see what is happening. Let's say even equal to employee and e2 equal to employee, and look at this, what happened. We have not called this function, but it is automatically getting invoked, okay. Now if I remove this double underscore, yeah, nothing happened, right? So this is like a move function in our earlier example. Now I have only a init function, that's okay. But the moment I use this double underscore, so Python has some special meaning with the double underscore variables, attributes and the functions, right? So here the double underscore function is implicitly getting invoked for any number of objects you create. It gets invoked, okay. That means the call is happening implicitly, that means automatically, okay. You are not explicitly calling this function, but still the function is getting invoked, okay. So this is like a initializer function. It is used to initialize your object, okay. So if you have one, you should use that. This gives you a luxury of facility to initialize your object with whatever specific information you want to give to these objects. Later on, you can definitely on the fly, you can change, you can modify, you can add more attributes, more variables into the object. That's a different thing, but the function is there which can help us to initialize the object. I write this similar code here once again, and suppose I take suppose age, okay. What happened here, sorry, self comma, okay, that's the age. Suppose I take age. Now self dot age equal to age I write, okay, and let's say city, let's say C only, then self dot ct equal to C. So let's understand what we are now doing. Equal to employee. Now the moment I do this time it has given error. Earlier it didn't give error because earlier it was expecting only one argument, that is self, and self is automatically passed implicitly, right? But this time it expects 3 arguments, okay. So 2 are missing, age and C is missing here. So we have to pass, let's say 26 comma, let's say Mumbai, Okay, now this time it worked, right? And it is printing inside init function, and that's okay because this is the message we have inside internally. Now let's understand even dot ct. What's the value? Yeah, Mumbai, correct, right? So that's how it is working. Even dot age. Okay, even dot start employee id start. But anyway, this does not have any much difference. But what I can do is I can do self dot emp id equal to, I can use this class attribute. Okay, I can use the class attribute and start using this particular thing. Okay, use this particular function, and then you can in fact modify this as well. Okay, now remember what we are doing. Okay, so the employee ID got changed to 101, and let's also understand even dot emp id. Okay, emp id is now 100. Now I create another object, employee, but I have to give some details, right? The age is, let's say 26, and city is Mumbai. Okay, now E3, sorry, let me create one more object here. E3 equal to employee, and here I will call it 38 and New York. Okay, so now you got E4, and you keep on doing this. Any number of employees you create, it will just keep on doing it. Okay, now let's understand E4 dot emp id, and emp id for the fourth employee is 103, and let's see what is the emp id for third employee. It's 102. That's right. So that means the employee ID is getting incremented every time. So remember, we are referring to employee attribute, that is class attribute. Okay, and how init works is, init works in a way where whatever you are passing, you can initialize, you can create additional attributes for that particular object, and you can assign those if you want to. Okay, not necessarily, you may not want to use ct as attribute there, right? You don't use it, that's okay. So we can write here something. So object created for let's say ct. Okay, format C, that's okay. So we are, our interest is, our intention is to see there is no ct for even now. Okay, but yeah, ct is used just for the function internally to just display you something. Okay, and that's okay. So the attribute won't be available with you for your use, right? But whatever attributes are getting created for all these employees is the very first attribute is age and the employee ID. So these are the details getting created for each employee the moment you create this, right, using E1 and E2 and E3 and so on. Okay, so that's how we can create some of the attributes and initialize your object with a lot of information if you want to create. So I will take another simple example. Let's say class student, and let's say I will use school name equal to JSP, whatever, I mean just I'm putting some name. Okay, so this is one thing, and the second important thing is init function. Okay, so this init is very useful because this is getting implicitly called self dot name. Okay, I want to assign the name, right? The moment I create an object, I can pass name and collect it in yes and n, n, and this n I assign to name, and the name getting created for that object. Self dot roll number. Okay, so you can think about using some roll number. So you may use some class attribute, or you don't want to use, that's okay, or you may put some number here. Okay, 10, let's say 100. So you may have 100 roll number for a couple of students, that's okay. S1 equal to student and Akash. Okay, that's the student getting created. Now S1 dot roll number, obviously it is 100. S1 dot name, that is Akash. Now let me create S2. Student John, and S2 dot name is John. S2 dot roll number is still 100 because this is hard coded, right? Every time you are just giving some number, right? You may think about creating number of students using a for loop where you will pass I value here, it is 1 for one time and the second for second time and so on, right? That's a different thing, right? If you want to use this way, you can very well use this one, right? Here I will say R, and for roll number you can simply use R. Okay, that's how we can do, right? This is how this time I get roll number 1 and 2 for 2 students, different roll numbers. So this is how the init function works. Okay, very important function, useful function, and we will be, this is a basic thing, and small examples I have taken to make sure that you understand clearly. Okay, now suppose S1 dot school name, obviously it is JSP, and for S2 as well it is the same school name because this is a class attribute. Now to summarize, we have discussed 3 important things. One, how to define a class, and how to use something called init function, the initialization function. Second, we discussed about class attributes, that is school name. This is applicable to the whole class, right? If any number of objects you are creating, so those many number of objects will have this particular attribute. Okay, and the init function is a class function, right? Similarly, we can have some other information, like for example details, student details. Okay, obviously the first argument is always going to be self. Here you can use self dot name and self dot roll number. Maybe you can have this kind of information for your students. Let's say S1 dot details gives you sorry, I forgot to put the bracket. Yeah, details for the first student, and if you do S2 dot students details, you will get John's details, right? So that's a simple way to use this init function, and the rest of the other functions you can, and you can initialize or construct your object with some attributes. Okay, moreover you can also have these attributes on the fly, right? Let's say S1 dot subjects. Okay, I can have, let's say, maths and science. Okay, and I can have S2 subjects different, and not necessarily I want to keep S2 subjects also, right? So I may not have this this attribute at all for S2. S2 may have some sports interest. Okay, and this guy may have been nominated for cricket, maybe. Okay, so or there could be hockey or something, right? So whatever. So the point here I'm trying to make is, I want to say that suppose S2 dot sports, this won't be available for okay, S1 dot sports, this won't be available for S1 because S1 has no such attribute, but S1 has name, S1 has roll number, and S1 has subjects. Okay, and you can use the subjects as an argument which is there, means on the fly every object can have whatever arguments the object is looking for. Okay, the object we may want to have. So for example, once we have created this object, we can create any attribute, additional attribute, if you want to create. Okay, so this is about the basic things around the student class. I will take the same example to elaborate something more. Here suppose I will define average marks and print I can simply return also, right? Return self dot m1 plus self dot m2 plus self dot m3. Suppose 3 marks I am considering here, and divide by 3, of course, right? It's average marks. So how to get, but we should have marks as well, right? So suppose m1, m2 and m3, and we should assign this m1 equal to m1 and self dot m2 equal to m2, self dot m3 equal to m3. So that's how we create the marks, right? So suppose I create the student s1, s1 equal to student, and here I give Akash his roll number. I want to keep it little complex thing here. We can do start roll number start with 100, let's say, right? And roll number I want to create, okay? Instead of taking it from the user, our system should generate that roll number, correct? So what I will do is students roll number start I will use, okay, and I'll just add 1 to it. So that first student will have roll number 101. But later on I also want to update this, because so that for the next student we will have a new roll number, okay? So that's how we can use the roll number. I don't have to have R now. So now marks I want to provide, let's say we have 23, 24, 26, okay? Those are the marks for student 1. Now the student 2, we will have, let's say, 28, 20, 12, and then maybe 20 or 16, okay? So this is for student 2, okay? What went wrong? We have okay, I want to use different name, that's another thing, but one argument missing for m3. Where it is that Akash, okay, where is this missing? S1 equal to student Akash, and student Akash init missing one required positional argument m3. How come? The self is passed into self, yeah, anything, let me just check here, m1, m2 and m3. Where it is missing. So missing one required positional argument, that is m3. I have Akash 23, that's me. Have I run this? Okay, I think there was nothing wrong, but it gave error. Probably the reason is we haven't run this earlier, because I don't see anything wrong here, right? So now you can see that, right? It is working. There is nothing I have changed, but just that I forgot to run the first cell and we were running the second directly. So there is nothing wrong, because we see that these are the 4 arguments and these are the 4 arguments we are passing. There is nothing wrong, correct? So now let's understand and get the average marks. And look at this average mark for student 1, the average marks are for student 2, and we are getting that, okay? So this is the kind of the basic things around object oriented programming concepts. So we will discuss little advanced things, maybe the object oriented concepts, the little theoretical part, and then the inheritance in the next video. Thank you very much.